Imagine being in a position where you can compete at something professionally. You're in a tournament or high-stakes match and are tapping into every bit of knowledge, skill, and practice you got what they need to win. Everything seems to be working well, only for
a bit of HP from that citrus berry, but it is going to try for another Will-O-Wisp. Will it hit? No, of course not. Of course Rotom is not going to hit with that Will-O-Wisp, as the confused and paralyzed Cresselia is unable to make a move either. The fully paralyzed Cresselia going to just sit there.
RNG's influence over video games dates all the way back to the industry's infant years, and I think we can all agree that for better or worse, whether it will continue to be present or not is a foregone conclusion. In many cases, it can serve to enhance a player's experience by ensuring no two playthroughs are the same. But on occasion, RNG, or in layman's terms dumb luck, can lead to game-ruining moments. Many game-ruining moments. Nowhere more so than in competitive settings. Common sense would dictate that to ensure a fair and consistent environment for players to demonstrate their aptitude and effort, external factors that can affect the outcome of a given match should be kept as minimal as possible, if not outright taken out altogether. Yet across all mediums of competition, there are players who willingly and enthusiastically participate in something for perhaps tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars, despite there being some semblance of luck involved. One could infer from the however many competitive mediums with RNG that players don't seem to care all that much about luck-based elements, yet at the same time those elements are constantly vilified for their penchant for leading to cheesy, undeserved wins. I find this to be especially curious in the world of Smash Bros, a game that at its core was meant to be a casual party game with no shortage of stupid bullshit that can happen. While much of that comes from items and stage hazards, both of which are not allowed in tournament play, a few characters have random elements in their kit that can drastically affect their performance. Today we'll be talking about those very characters, and whether their luck-based mechanics are good or bad for the game. The reason I want to bring this to attention is that RNG in Smash is different from RNG in most other games. For example, in League of Legends, the universal element of luck is crit chance, the probability of a champion dealing bonus damage with every hit. Mechanically, it's not actually luck-based, as there's an algorithm designed to ensure that a player with a 40% crit chance will on average make 4 crits per strike per 10 hits no matter what. But overall, everyone's okay with crit being the way it is because everyone is subject to the same benefits and drawbacks the mechanic has to offer. A more prevalent example would be in Yu-Gi-Oh!, a card game that has both internally built-in random mechanics like dice rolls, coin flips, and whatnot, but on a broader level, the odds of a player drawing the right card at the right time. Seeing as how it affects all players no matter what, everyone more or less allows for it to take place, and constructs their deck in a way that minimizes the probability of drawing a useless hand, also known as breaking. Typically speaking, if elements of RNG affect all participants equally and within reasonable extent, it's allowed to exist, even in competitive formats. So long as the player has more agency over the game than random factors, or more importantly, they have control over their exposure to randomness, then it shouldn't affect the results over the long term. Without going on too big of a tangent, I find poker to be demonstrative of this. Obviously, there is dumb luck involved. You could have the best hand in the world and land a near unbeatable flop, only to get a bad beat on the turn and river. Happens all the time. But through probability, manipulation of bets, awareness of player habits, your turn order for that round, etc., you can maximize the chances of you winning, allowing for professional poker players to be quite consistent in a game that's ultimately predicated on random chance at its foundation. Anyways, you might be wondering when I'll stop talking about other games and start talking about Smash. I said earlier that RNG in Smash is different from RNG in other games. Why is that? For one, it pertains to the question of if elements of RNG affect all participants equally and within reasonable extent. The former is where things contrast. Not all characters in Smash have a conspicuously random element. Only a few have explicit RNG factors, while a greater majority have a minor factor. The universal form of RNG in Smash Ultimate is tripping, not to be confused with tripping in Brawl. Basically, most attacks in the game have a very small chance to trip opponents, provided the knockback isn't high enough to lift them off the ground. So lower percents, the occasional attack here or there might cause someone to slip and fall. I believe in Ultimate it's something like a 7% chance. 99% of the time, this doesn't really affect the outcome of a match because at lower percents, most attacks will lead into further attacks anyway. Adding on to that, just about every character in the game has at least 1 or 2 attacks with an increased chance to trip opponents. Stuff like DK's down tilt, Kirby's down tilt, Rob's down tilt, stuff like that. Mostly down tilts. Curiously, Steve is the only character in the game who I believe has nothing with an increased trip chance or a chance to trip at all. A fact that Waidu has continuously told me during carpools to majors as some grade A copium to defend Steve as a character. But I digress. Seeing as how tripping falls into the near universal category, it's not really that much of an issue for most players, especially since it's tied to an attack that's known to set up combos or tech chases anyway, whether it does or it doesn't trip. Therefore, it's within reasonable extent and is practically inconsequential. But what about characters with openly random attacks? As mentioned, there aren't that many, but it's still a worthwhile thing to bring up. The full list of characters with anything that can randomly affect their performance go as follows: Kirby, Luigi, Peach, Game & Watch, Snake, Ivysaur, Diddy Kong, Villager, Duck Hunt, King K. Rool, Banjo, and Hero. Some of these might be a bit confusing to you as their random elements are not as noticeable, so let's go through one at a time. For Kirby, whenever struck by an attack, he has a 1 in 32 chance of losing his copy ability, regardless of the strength of said attack. For Luigi, we obviously know his green missile has a 10% chance to misfire, causing him to travel at ludicrous speed with an equal amount of damage and kill power to boot. He also has a 50% chance to get stuck in a wall if he makes contact with one above a certain speed. Peach's vegetables can pick up a random assortment of throwable items of varying power or function. She can even pick up a Mr. Saturn, an item that instantly breaks shields, or a bomb, practically an insta-kill at mid% or higher. Game & Watch has Judge, cycling through numbers 1 through 9 to produce different effects. Snake C4, when stickied onto someone, has a small chance of falling off whenever they're struck by a powerful attack. Ivysaur's Razor Leaf travels in a random direction, either curving up, down, or straight. Diddy Kong's Rocket Barrel randomly flies around if he's attacked while using the move. The player can alter the direction of the barrels, but only for a small amount of time, after which they fly around erratically. Villager has a random chance of attacking with either 1, 2, or 3 turnips whenever using up and downer. And whenever he cuts down timber, he has a small chance of picking up a block of wood or a piece of fruit that can be thrown to deal damage or eaten as a healing item respectively. Duck Hunt's Wild Gunman cycles through a group of 5 dudes in a random order until each one was summoned once before repeating. So while you're ultimately guaranteed to get one of each after 5 uses, the order is random. K. Rool's crown reappears either in front or behind him if he doesn't catch the crown and it falls off screen. Banjo's rear egg bounces unpredictably, and finally Hero has a small chance to critically strike for double damage on his smash attacks, and down B menu is RNG incarnate. Needless to say, not all of these elements have the same impact on a game, so for the sake of this video, I'll mostly talk about the ones that can have wildly different results on a character's threat level: Luigi, Peach, Game & Watch, and Hero. It bears repeating that generally players are okay with random elements, so long as it affects everyone fairly and universally, while also not being so overly impactful in a situation that it carries more agency than the player's own. It stands to reason that it makes no difference whether K. Rool's crown ends up in front or behind him. However, attacks like Peach's vegetable are an entirely different story. The amount of pressure she can exert on her opponent greatly differs by what she picks up from her down B. If she picks up a smiley, bored, sleepy, shocked, or laughing face, they all do the same thing. But if she picks up a winky face turnip, that does double the damage of a normal one. If she gets dot eyes, that's more than triple the damage of a normal one, and if she picks up a stitch face, that does roughly 5 times more damage than a normal one. The more damage an item does, the more hit lag induced, the more shield damage, the more knockback, etc. Then there's a chance of pulling out a Mr. Saturn or Bomb, the former discouraging any usage of shield whatsoever, as getting hit by it guarantees a shield break, and the latter being a near insta-kill as said before. The same applies to Game & Watch's Judge. Getting hit by a 1 causes him to hurt himself, while getting hit by a 9 is the third most powerful non-final smash attack in the game on a disjointed attack that comes out frame 16, which isn't the most practical, but far more than Ganon's reverse aerial Warlock Punch or Roy and Crom's Flare Blade. These types of attacks can have serious consequences on whether you win or lose a match, and all of it happens at random. To the average player, it doesn't appear to be that big of an issue, but in competition, stuff like that can be seen as a major red flag. When Hero first came out, many people advocated for him to get banned from tournament play, as the odds of him cheesing wins through sheer luck was too high for him to be considered fair. Fighting games are one of the most skill-expressive mediums in all of competitive gaming. Any semblance of RNG should theoretically not be allowed to exist, as that can disproportionately inflate someone's results higher than what they rightfully earned. Now, a counter-argument can be made for characters like Luigi and Hero, whose internal weaknesses more than make up for the potential upside of whatever randomness they might have. But can the same be said for fighters like Peach and Game & Watch, two high or potentially top-tier characters? Probably not, begging the question, is randomness healthy for Smash's competitive scene? The most apparent benefit of RNG is that ensures no two outcomes are the same, allowing for two playthroughs to produce widely different results, and therefore make games more replayable than those that can be solved. If everything plays out in a telegraphed, predetermined fashion, the game would get boring and lose all replayability. A way to add that is to introduce RNG elements. For example, in Fire Emblem, you might have one playthrough where a character is blessed with many good level ups or cursed with many bad ones. It adds an incentive to play again and again to see if you can get something better. And that's not to say you can't achieve replayability without RNG. Competitive games are the most popular genre of gaming for that very reason. RNG doesn't have to exist. Players are different. They can adapt, improve, change, thus motivating and pressuring everyone else to do the same. Even though competitive Smash Ultimate consists of the same 7 or 8 stages, what makes it so addicting is that there are so many characters and so many situations and interactions within a game that you can play for tens of thousands of hours and only experience a fraction of the total number of possibilities the game has to offer. And so there really isn't a need for RNG. In fact, for competitive games, RNG has a higher likelihood of being a bad thing than a good one. After all, no one feels good about a game being won or lost on dumb luck, as it doesn't feel deserved or earned. Even so, RNG is a prevalent factor in Smash, and more so for the characters mentioned above. As with any mechanic in any video game, what determines if it's healthy or fair is not the mechanic itself, but the countermeasures available in response to it. With this in mind, attacks like Game & Watch's Judge are perfectly fine in my opinion. Even though it has a 1 in 9 chance of annihilating a character's entire existence off the face of the earth, it's kept in check by having short range, being rather slow, and the fact that a 1 in 9 chance is rare and therefore unreliable. Once in a while you'll see a Game & Watch player get a 9 kill, but it doesn't happen often enough to artificially affect a player's long-term performance. Furthermore, the opponent can take the necessary precautions to avoid getting hit by Judge whatsoever, either by staying out of range or blocking the attack with shield. In other words, the opponent having control over their exposure to the move, coupled with a low chance of said move producing the ideal result, gives Judge a low risk to reward ratio, and so the vast majority of Game & Watch players opt out of using it in favor of more practical guaranteed pressure. The same goes for Luigi's Green Missile. Once in a blue moon it can be a devastating YOLO kill option, but if it misses, you're gonna eat an extremely heavy punish. So Luigi mains refrain from using it for anything other than recovery, and instead resort to their more practical yet equally degenerate options. No offense to Luigi mains, of course. Though for elements like Peach or Hero, those do have a practical risk to reward ratio. A core part of their neutral game consists of vegetable and menu respectively, leading to many opportunities for them to get the ideal scenario and therefore radically change the outcome of a fight. In fact, not too long ago, even though Spargo ultimately won during his match against Mudace in Battle of BC5, Mudace pulled out 2 Stitch faces back to back, the equivalent of landing a 1.7% chance twice in a row. Obviously this is an extremely rare occurrence and will likely not happen for hundreds of games, but it enabled Mudace to reverse an entire full stock deficit, then swing game 2 in his favor, ultimately taking it, which by all accounts would have gone to Spargo given how far ahead he was. Not to discredit Mudace's capabilities, he's one of the best players in the world right now, but in that very scenario he was beyond lucky. For many players this can be seen as one of those instances where RNG did have a consequential impact on a game. And if this were a Game 5 instead of a Game 2, that would be one of the most tilting ways to lose a set. It may have been even more disastrous if it was a bomb or Mr. Saturn. Fortunately, just like Game & Watch's Judge, mileage with a Stitch face comes down to how well you can use it and how well the opponent plays around it. So even though luck is what determines which turnip you get, a Stitch face may be as inconsequential as a smiley one if the Peach player doesn't know what to do with it. They still have to land the attack, and that applies to every other RNG element in Smash. While I wholeheartedly believe that the game would be better off if there were no random elements whatsoever, the fact that nothing in this game is a surefire hit is in and of itself the universal balancing mechanism. Hero can top deck a thwack, or Peach can pull bombs back to back, but that doesn't mean they're guaranteed to land, just like how Game & Watch can get 9 after 9, but he still has to land the hit. From a competitive design standpoint, these moves are not good for the game. The fact that some characters have access to what is essentially an instant kill while others don't have the same is conceptually unfair. I know what you're gonna say, Smash's random elements were not designed for competitive, it was designed for casual play, and I get it. That being said, even though they have a chance to produce completely undeserved wins or losses, there are countermeasures in place to prevent it from ever becoming a common issue. Maybe 1 out of every 100 games you can score a cheesy kill with a Judge 9, bomb turnip, or misfire, but since the opponent also has a say over whether they do or don't get hit by it, that ensures RNG doesn't get in the way of a fair and competitive environment. Besides, more players would complain about Peach's float mechanic, Luigi's 0 to deaths, or everything else in Game & Watch's kit than their actual luck-based elements, so I think we're good on that front. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on RNG in Smash in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your stance on this. Aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other discussion videos if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next one. Take care.